My, my name is Lori Winterfelt, and I'm excited tonight to welcome you to the League of Women Voters Legislative Forum. We are very fortunate in our area to be represented by some wonderful people who are with us here tonight, and we'll be hearing a lot from them. First of all, I want to thank the Moorhead Public Library for being our host here tonight, and I also want to thank Moorhead Cable Access Media for their role in recording this for posterity, so you'll be able to watch yourself in perpetuity. That's always fun to do. I want to introduce our representatives this evening. First of all, Senator Kent Eakin from Twin Valley, Minnesota. He was first elected to the House in 2002 and elected to the Senate in 2012 and re-elected in 2016. We have District 4B Representative Paul Marquardt, who lives in Dilworth and was first elected to the House in 2020. In the future, he was elected. And then District 4A Representative Ben Lean from Moorhead, and he's in his third term. He was first elected in 2012. So welcome to our legislators. To get started tonight, we're going to have each of the legislators start with a 5-minute review of the session so far. There's what they see as the triumphs and the trials that are involved with their work in the Minnesota legislature in St. Paul for us. And then I have a number of questions already, but if you do have questions, please raise your hand, and Mary will hand you a card, and you can write down the question and bring it up. We already have a wonderful grouping of cards here and a very diverse group of questions, so you guys are going to be tested mightily tonight. Smart group of people in Moorhead. So go ahead. Do you want to start, Kent?
Sure. Thank you, Lori. And I would also like to thank the League and the library for hosting this event tonight. Very important part of the session right now. We are in a 2-year budget cycle right now, so we're setting the budget for the next 2 years. It'll be about a $46 billion budget that we're deciding how to invest. And we've passed all the major budget bills through the Senate and the House, but they're different versions. So now we're in the process of working out those differences. And we are going to be in the process of having conference committees meet where you have members from both the House and the Senate that are appointed to work out those differences and hopefully come forward with bills that the governor can sign. If there's a veto, it's kind of back to the drawing board and having the governor engaged in that process to ensure that we get something that can be signed, because overriding a veto is next to impossible. It rarely ever happens. So the governor has a very significant role in this process of putting the budget together. And right now, there's some fairly significant differences just between the House and the Senate that need to be worked out before going on to the governor. And even though there's one-party control right now of the legislature, the Republicans control both the House and the Senate. But this happens, I've noticed, when Democrats are in control too. Oftentimes, there's still some significant differences that need to be worked out. One area of significant difference is just in the area of the tax bill, where the House has about a $1.35 billion tax cut bill. The Senate has about a $900 million tax cut bill. And of course, that affects all the other areas of the budget, because that determines what's left over for investments in education, and health care, long-term care, and so on. And so these discussions coming up now are going to be really important for the next 2 years. And it's important for us to get input from our constituents. At this time, it's one of the reasons that we have been holding town hall meetings around the district in order to get people's input and let people know what's been happening. I have some concerns about the budgets that have been proposed. There's some good in these budgets, some areas of concern, however. One of the areas that I'm most concerned about is in Health and Human Services, where we've actually seen cuts being made in both the House and the Senate bills. And in the Senate, it's about $335 million in cuts. And I'm concerned because the needs in health care has been growing, especially in the areas of long-term care. And I feel that those areas have been neglected and need to be addressed. So I have concerns about that. But we also have, and usually we do a big bonding bill in the non-budget year, but one wasn't done last year when it was supposed to be done. We did get one passed in both the House and the Senate, but there was a one-number difference between the House and the Senate, and everything unraveled at the last minute because of that. And so this year, we're hoping to get a bonding bill done as well as the budget bills. We in the Senate have moved forward with basically the bonding bill that was passed last session, minus the Southwest Light Rail, which was the major obstacle. That now has been removed. They've figured out a way to pay for the Southwest Light Rail without legislative action down in Hennepin County. So that obstacle has been removed. It gives me high hopes that we're going to get a bonding bill done this year that would include the railroad underpass for Moorhead, that would include a wastewater treatment upgrade for Detroit Lakes. It would include a flood mitigation project for Halstead. A lot of good things in that bill for our area. And I serve on the Capital Investment Committee and did sign on to the bill along with Senator Senjum, the chair. So it's a good bipartisan bill. I hope that we get a vote on it. But the House has to send us a bonding bill first. The Constitution requires that bonding bills originate in the House. So now with that, there is that tax bill I talked about, and if we're going to have a bonding bill, we're going to have a tax bill too. The two are really inextricably connected. I know in the House the Speaker's been kind of holding back on a bonding bill because he knows that the governor wants a big bonding bill. The Speaker wants to have a big tax cut bill, so he's using that as leverage. So you're not going to get one without the other. But I do feel optimistic that we're going to get both because we passed a tax bill last year as well with a significant bipartisan majority. And that tax bill included a lot of good things in it, including the ag to school tax credit, a 40% tax credit for ag lands and for bond issues. It included some other significant tax relief too, an exemption on the business property tax, the statewide business property tax up to $100,000. Of the value of a business. And so a lot of good things there. And again, I'm hopeful that we can move forward with that. Healthcare, we maybe talk a little bit later about the healthcare issue. We did pass an emergency healthcare relief bill that would provide a 25% reduction in healthcare premiums for those in the individual market who are experiencing dramatic increases in their premiums. And that includes a lot of people in our area because we have a lot of farmers and a lot of small business people who are in that individual market. It's about 5% statewide, but in our area, it's an even higher percentage of the population. And there was also a reinsurance bill that was passed. I have some concerns about that bill, whether or not it's going to achieve the goals of actually resulting in more options for people and lower costs. I am an advocate of a Minnesota Care buy-in option for people in rural Minnesota at least, and even looking at doing it statewide. It would be something like a Medicare for all here at the state level. So that's one of the proposals that I'm advocating for. And with that, I guess I don't know if I've used up my 5 minutes probably and then some.
Go ahead.
Very good. Well, thank you, Lori. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring and for the Moorhead Library for hosting us here tonight. And you know what I think this session is really going to be about is the right priorities and the right balance. And when I talk about that, we have about a $1.65 billion surplus. And kind of what Senator Eakin was talking about is kind of the first step in all of this. And so you're going to kind of see the House and the Senate sending out their priorities. The governor in his budget set out his priority. And now it's to mesh those two and come up with the right balance and the right priorities. And so what I think when we're all said and done with this session, I think you're going to see about a third in tax cuts. I think you're going to see a third in education and a third in health care and broadband services for veterans and so forth. I think that's going to be kind of the mix when we're all done. We're not there yet. So there's some good things and there's some bad things. In the tax bill right now, in all of the tax bills is one of my very top priorities is the 40 or 50% credit for agricultural land and school building bonds. And right now, when it comes to a lot of the schools in the area in the rural Minnesota, it's been very difficult to pass these school building bonds, and these schools need new upgraded facilities. In fact, what we're seeing is that in the last 2 years, in the metro, about 88% of all the school bond referendums are passing, Well, in rural Minnesota, it's only about 56%. And one of the big reasons for that is the very unfair, untenable position we've put farmers in these school building bonds. For example, Dilworth, Glendon, Felton, farmland in that situation would pay 65% of the cost. And yet there's hardly any population out there. Barnesville, 74%. And, you know, you go to some districts like Rothsay, that's, or others that are, you know, up around 90%. And so this not only would help lower property taxes for farmers, but another big benefit is that it creates more equity among students in rural and metro area. Because a student here in rural Minnesota deserves just as much of a high-class, top world facility as someone in a wealthier suburb in the metro area. I mean, it's an equity for educational quality. So that is really big. As Senator Ekin mentioned, we did pass something to try to get a handle on health care. This 25% rebate on those in that individual market. And that should actually, if you qualify for that, you should be seeing that on your statement this month or at the very latest in May. And so those are some of the good things that are happening when it comes to Real ID. That's where you're going to need that enhanced license, driver's license. Otherwise, you're going to have a passport starting January 1st of next year just to go from Fargo to Minneapolis. So we have a bill that is passed now, both houses. They need to reconcile and then get that to the governor. Some of the big disappointments so far is, one, that there is no funding for our home community-based healthcare workers. Those folks, and I know there are some here tonight, that take care of our most vulnerable people. And unfortunately, they have been great advocates. There hasn't been a raise for those personal care attendants and workers since 2013. They had a proposal for a 4% increase each of the next 2 years, which is more than fair and more than deserved. And there's no funding in any of the bills right now. And we know that those workers are paid for their minds, but they throw their hearts in for free because of the work that they do for their clients. And so that's a big disappointment. Last thing I'll end with is right now with education. You've got three kind of proposals out there. You've got the governor's proposal that would increase per pupil funding by 2% each of the next 2 years. So if you want to calculate that, you take the number of students you have, 2% would be about $120 increase per student each of the next 2 years. The Senate's about 1.5%, $90, and the House checks in third at 1.25%, which would be about $75. I think when all is said and done, you're going to see a 2 and a 2. I really think the governor's going to pull folks that way. So I have naive optimism that we are going to get this all together, and that in the end we're going to have the right priorities and the right balance.
You guys are really impressive, because that was like 5 minutes on the button. So obviously you guys are just trained to speak in 5-minute sound bites. So we'll see how you do it as the new guy on the block, Ben.
Thank you, Lori. Yes, I'll do my best.
I'll stop you if you go too far.
Okay, sounds good, sounds good. I've never been known to be too long-winded, so. But yeah, thank you, Lori, for moderating, and of course the League and the Moorhead Library again for hosting us. This is always a very nice location for us to have this event. We've done this a handful of times now, and it's always good. So thank you all for taking the time out of your evenings to come, ask us questions and hear what's going on in the legislature. And, I think Senator Ekin and Representative Marquardt really did a pretty good job of summing, where we're at right now in terms of what's been passed, what's kind of still happening, what's still moving, and overall, we have these different budget targets, or these different spending amounts that all the different committees have, House and Senate. And so right now, we're of course on the spring Easter Passover recess, and last week and the week before, we spent the time passing these large omnibus bills. So these are the large finance bills that come out of each House and Senate committee respectively. And so right now, the House and the Senate, they'll get together in the conference committee, work out the differences, and pass those bills on to the governor. And there is some concern that, the governor may veto some of these bills. And one thing that's kind of hanging over all of this is the fact that a lot of these bills have a lot of policy provisions that the governor has sent letters to different committee chairs and said, I want these policy bills and these finance bills to be two separate issues, two separate things going on here. And so that, some policy provisions in some of these finance bills may be enough for the governor to veto some of these bills. So that's certainly a situation that we have to keep in the back of our minds, that this may happen, and it may take a second attempt at getting some of these larger finance bills passed before the governor can indeed sign them into law. Now, the good thing is that it's early April, and so we still have, the rest of this month and then about 3 weeks into May to pass these bills. So, here we're certainly hoping we can wrap this up and we don't need to be talking about special sessions and things like that. We do still have the time to be taking care of this business, but that's just kind of the lay of the land as far as where we're at right now. And a couple provisions specifically for our area here for Clay County. A lot of these pieces are in the tax bill, working their way through. The tax bill are $3 million for the Border City Enterprise and Development Zone program. That's, of course, funding that comes from St. Paul to the 5 border cities along the Minnesota-Dakota borders that really help out business retention, helped businesses to expand in things, some property tax offsets. Moorhead uses it a lot for workers' comp offsets. So that's moving in the tax bill. We also have the funding for, or rather not the funding, but the policy language that says, it's okay, and this has to be in the tax bill. It is policy, but it does have to be in the tax bill because it pertains to the local option sales tax for Clay County that Clay County passed. That we do have that in the tax bill that says, okay, Clay County can issue that half-cent sales tax to build the new jail and law enforcement center. We had tried to get some bonding dollars last year for that. We had tried also to get some cash for that project. New county jails and, by extension, the law enforcement center. That's not something the state has typically funded in the past. It usually relies on the local governments to take care of that project. And so, I think people just didn't want to set that precedent. Clay County is the oldest jail in the state. We are having beds shut down and everything by the Department of Corrections, but still setting that precedent, I think a lot of people had concerns for that. And so Clay County voters had went out last year and voted by a 66% margin that, yes, we will pay this half-cent sales tax for the next 20 years to pay for this facility. So that is in the tax bill. Also what's in the tax bill, and this is, a little kind of in the weeds, so to speak, but an extension for a TIF district, which is a tax increment financing district for Moorhead. And this is kind of an economic development tool local governments have. But basically what happened is these districts, governments, or local governments can use these districts to do economic development for a period of 5 years. Well, the recession came, a lot of this action didn't happen in the last 5 years, and it's not just Moorhead, it's a handful of communities around the state. And so we were granted a 3-year extension through the tax bill to continue with that district. So, and that's really going to impact the downtown area. I know a lot of folks have been talking about more development downtown, and so I think that's another tool that we'll be able to help out with. So those are 3 things that are in the tax bill right now as it stands in the House, and we'll keep working at making sure that they cross the finish line, along with the rest of the tax bill. So, with that, like I say, I'm certainly pleased to see so many folks out tonight, and happy to answer your questions about more of the details and other policies and things going on.
Very impressive, Ben. I thought you were going to go a little long there when you started thanking people, but you made it. We're going to start the questions. We want you to try to limit your responses to about 2 minutes this time. And we're going to start the answers this time with Paul, so we can, nobody has to be the person that goes last every time. We have a number of questions about tax relief. One about farm tax relief, which you addressed a little bit in terms of the schools, the status of tax relief for Minnesota landowners, and then also, according to Kiplinger's, Minnesota is one of 13 states taxing Social Security benefits. What would it take to make Social Security income tax-free? So, Paul, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, that's fantastic. Yes. In the House tax bill, we have the agricultural ag credit, which you've already talked about. And then there's also let's go to Social Security on senior citizens. There is a provision in the House tax bill that right now the first $32,000 of your income is not taxed for Social Security, and after that it is. But that hasn't moved for a long, long time. So the House bill moves that 32,000 kind of floor up to 61,000 in the first year and 72,000 the next year. That does cost about $270 million over 2 years. And if you were to fully take off all of the taxes off Social Security, it'd be about $500 million a year. So we can't afford that much. But I do think before things are done, you're going to see some break there on Social Security taxes for seniors. On the property tax portion, local government aid and county program aid, which is huge to rural Minnesota and our communities to keep property taxes low and services top notch. The governor has $20 million for local government aid and 10 for county program aid. The Senate has 12 local government aid, 6 county program aid, and the House right now doesn't have anything. So you're going to wind up with something, but they're going to have to talk about that. And Lori, there was one more point I'm missing on taxes. Well, I think we covered farm taxes earlier, certainly. And okay, so I think, yeah. Well, so that's kind of where the House is at right now, but the top priority right now is the agricultural property tax relief.
Thanks.
That ag property tax piece, that has support in the House and Senate. It was something that was in the tax bill last year that didn't become law, and so I was I'm very appreciative that people around the state, not just in greater Minnesota, but in the metro, are recognizing that this is a very significant issue for us. It impacts, our local communities, it impacts local governments, it's impacting the school districts, and this is something that we need to take care of. So I'm very pleased to see that we have some relief for those agricultural landowners in the in the tax bill. We're at a point right now where, we're seeing volumes and crop yields very high, but they're not getting the prices that they got, 5 years ago or so. So it's a big deal. And with agriculture comprising about a little under a third of Minnesota's economy, that's a big deal. It's not just about feeding people and putting food on the table, but it's a big part of our economy. So that is something that we need to get done, and I'm pretty confident that will stay in the tax bill. The Social Security tax, I am pleased to see that we're doing that. As Representative Marquardt mentioned, a full-out exemption of taxes on those Social Security benefits. It's pretty rich. It would put a very significant hole in the state budget that we would either have to cut services elsewhere or backfill elsewhere. And so I think this is a good way to do it in steps. And if we find ourselves in the future with, another very healthy economy, another very healthy budget situation, maybe we can kind of keep taking cracks to lower that. But I think where we're at right now in the House is a good start. Overall in the tax bill, though, something that is concerning to me is this concept that we'd be taking $450 million out of the general fund and putting it into dedicated transportation funding. It's basically a way, and I know folks may have conflicting feelings about this, but personally, I see this as a way to get around increased tab fees or an increased gas tax. Those are both already constitutionally dedicated funding sources that go to only roads and bridges. And so really, by extension, by taking this $450 million out of the general fund and putting it into a newly dedicated transportation pot, which wouldn't be constitutionally dedicated, by the way, so a future legislature could come in if we had other, negative budget situations, a future legislature could still come in and take that money. But it's really it's really putting roads and bridges in competition with people. And with our budget situation the way it is, I just don't see that that's a wise use of state dollars. I think we should be continuing to focus on the tab fees, continuing to focus on the gas tax, which are user fees. You don't pay those unless you actually, drive on the roads. And also with the gas tax, that's based on how much you drive on the roads. So, I just see that as a more equitable funding source for transportation.
Thank you. Senator Eakin, take a
Sure.
shot at taxes.
Sure. And the on the ag tax issue, as has already been mentioned, the ag to school, either 40 to 50%, 40% tax credit in the Senate, 50% in the House. So if we have a tax bill, I believe that's going to be a part of it, which is important considering the fact that right now farmers are taking a real hit with the downturn in the farm economy, with the increasing insurance rates, health insurance for them because they're in the individual market. And so that was important. Representative Marquardt and I actually have a bill in to remove 100% of the tax for bond issues on ag land because we don't feel that it's fair to be taxing on those lands, that it would just be a house garage in 1 acre. As far as the issue of property taxes generally, I've always felt that that's the least fair kind of tax, that we should be phasing it out over time, and this tax credit is a step in the right direction to doing that. But the property tax is very antiquated. It's very arbitrary. It's very archaic, and it's very unfair. It's very regressive. It hits people in rural Minnesota the hardest. It hits people in lower and middle income groups the hardest. So for that reason, I think that it should be removed. And I don't think that the tax bills that are being proposed in either the House or the Senate focus enough on the regressive taxes, on the property taxes, as it should. And, you know, Representative Marquardt had mentioned the LGA, and the highest that's being proposed in the legislature is the $12 million in LGA in the Senate, and $6 million for county program aid. Obviously, this isn't enough to even get us back to where we were back in 2002. To get us back to 2002 levels for local government aid, we'd actually need to have $44 million put back in. So those are some of the things that I'm hoping to see. And as far as the Social Security, the tax on Social Security benefits, I do believe we need to at least move the cap up as far as how much you can earn before you're going to be taxed. I actually have a bill in to completely remove the tax on Social Security benefits, and I do pay for it. I think it should be paid for. I don't want to see that money being taken from our schools or from our nursing homes or from other vital services that we need. And so I propose that we replace it with a tax on investment income or passive income over $250,000 a year. The first $250,000 in passive income that you earn or receive wouldn't be taxed. But anything after that, you'd be paying, it'd be about the same as what most people pay on their earned income to support Social Security, because on this unearned income or the passive income, they pay no tax to support Social Security, and it would be about that 6.2% that they would pay on that. And that would completely replace and pay for removing all the tax that we currently have on Social Security benefits.
Another question that's come in, and it relates to one of the things that you've both talked about, and I'm going to have Representative Lean respond to this first. The Minnesota library community was disappointed with the $2 million, with the increase was not included in the first draft of the omnibus bills. And Minnesota Lake Agassiz Arts Council is currently being funded at the same rate as they were in 2001. And I'm especially concerned because I didn't realize about the reductions proposed in LGA and county aid, because that's the other source of the library funds is from our local governments. Any insights on that, or any movement you see to provide better support for the libraries?
That is certainly disappointing. I mean, I've signed on to bills to boost up that funding, not only to boost up the funding, but also to incorporate a formula change, which takes into account Greater Minnesota libraries more than they are right now. That's something I'm very supportive of, and something that we need to be taking seriously. I've met with librarians from around the region a couple different times over the last couple of years, and me myself, one day my internet service was out, the provider was out, I don't know what it was, around Fargo-Moorhead, and so the first place I came was the library for that service to do some work and things. And so, I mean, they are very important. We need to be protecting that funding. We need to be making sure that the funding is more equitable across the state, because really it's more about, it's more than, just coming here to check out books. It's a lot of people coming here to study, a lot of people coming here to do homework or look for jobs on the internet and those sorts of things. And so that, I think, gets a little bit into broadband too also. But yeah, absolutely, we need to be funding our libraries at levels, because they really are, gems in our community, so to speak. Everybody has access to the library, and they offer a lot of amenities that otherwise people normally may not have access to.
Senator Eakin.
Yes, and I would agree with Representative Lean that how critically important our public libraries are to our communities, and I'd say even more so in our rural communities, where in some cases it's the only access they may have to high-speed internet services, and so a very, very vital component of our rural communities. And I was disappointed too, very disappointed, especially when we saw that all of the 12 library systems in the state were behind this formula change. And it does require some new funding to do that. I think, $2 to $3 million to make sure we're holding all the library systems harmless. And that's really the only way that you're going to get it passed, because you're going to generate opposition if you're going to be doing harm to any of the other library systems. And that's the way we need to operate, really, I think, in rural Minnesota, is that we are outnumbered. And we're not just going to be taking things away from the metro area to give to ourselves. We're going to have solutions that include at least a hold harmless provision, if not making sure everybody gets some benefit from it. And I think that it was if we don't do it this year, it's a lost opportunity. There's still time. Even though it didn't make it into either one of the omnibus bills in the House or the Senate, but it's not a done deal yet. And so I've been encouraging, I think we need to be talking to all the legislators in the regions that are being helped by this, including all the legislators in the Lake region, or the Lake Agassiz region, and trying to get things changed before the final product is passed through. I've heard talk, I think there's concerns about the possibility of actual closure of some library branches in our area, which would be devastating for those communities that lose them. And our rural communities are already struggling. We don't want to add to those burdens and those struggles anymore.
Well, just to add to what the Senator and Representative said, libraries have been a Minnesota tradition. It's what's brought our communities together where people can go. And as Senator Eakin mentioned, all 12 systems were on board with this new formula change. And they need to go from about 14 to 16, $17 million to make it work. And the formula basically has 4 parts to it: your tax base, your population, your geography, and your basic needs. And it was just kind of moving a couple that would actually help rural Minnesota. And I know the registered users are up in the 7-county Lake Agassiz regional area. And if this bill would have gone through with the increase, it would have increased the funding for Lake Agassiz Regional Library from about $470,000 to about $670,000, about a 43% increase. So it's significant. And so I totally agree with what you've already heard here. And I know we've all been supporters of trying to get that funding. But we have a $1.65 billion surplus, and this would be about $2 million of that. So I don't think it's that great of a sacrifice to be able to provide some extra dollars for our libraries.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to start the next question with Senator Eakin. And I'm trying to logically combine some of the questions here, because there are a lot of really, really good questions. Moorhead has a new downtown group that's been organized to bring new vitality to downtown. Can you help with the creation of such a program, with a program similar to the North Dakota Renaissance Zone? And also, I think what's important when we think about the downtown redevelopment, will Moorhead ever get the underpass? If so, when? Could you give us a date and a time?
Let's see, May 22nd, 2000. No, I wish I could. I wish I had that kind of power. But I am optimistic that we will get the railroad underpass. And this year in a bonding bill, it was in the bonding bill that we passed last year. As I said, things unraveled at the last minute because of, I think there was some games being played with the bonding bill at the end, games of using the clock in a game of political chicken, high-stakes political chicken. We got the bonding bill 15 minutes before the midnight deadline, and people were rifling through the bill trying to figure out if their projects were in or out. But we did get that railroad underpass funding in there. And we have it now in the bill that's sitting on the Senate floor right now. And I know that Senator Senjum, who's the current chair of the Capital Investment Committee, we have the past chair, Senator Langseth, here today. I'm sure if he was still in the Senate, we'd probably have that railroad underpass done right now. But we're I know that Senator Senjum does want to get that bonding bill done. As I said, I signed on to the bill with him, and we're still waiting on Speaker Dowd to try to start moving things in the House. Now, in terms of the downtown development and the Renaissance zones, I do think that that's a good idea. It's worked well in Fargo, it's worked well in North Dakota, and I believe it's worked well in other states like Michigan. I think it's been used there as well. I think it's something that we need to look at. As far as doing it statewide, it would require getting support across the state. I think that we should also be looking at the possibility of doing something like that in conjunction with the border cities, because the border cities legislation, and Representative Lean's already talked about this, but that's been a very successful economic development tool for the border cities like Moorhead and Dilworth and the others along the North Dakota-South Dakota border. I think that we should be expanding on that as well. And I think Renaissance zones could be a part of that, where you're allowing for, tax-free zones for both income and property taxes, and attracting businesses, keeping businesses, expanding businesses in our area. So vitally important, and it's especially important in the border areas because of the unlevel playing field that we're experiencing. And I'm working on other things as well, including regulatory reform and the building codes, because our building codes are more stringent than they are over in Fargo. I think that has been a hindrance to our businesses here, and so we've been working to try to develop a proposal that, we brought the proposals in that would require that we have standards or building codes that are no less stringent than Fargo's, but they can be comparable to North Dakota's, so that we don't. It is one market here between Fargo and Moorhead, Dilworth, and West Fargo. It is one market, and it needs to be treated as such in order to create that level playing field.
Okay, thank you. Representative Marquardt.
Oh, thank you. I won't address the intersection. That's been in Kent's thing here, but I'm certainly in support of it. But more of the Renaissance zone. We had something in Minnesota called Job Z, which was basically would free basically all taxes for businesses that located in a certain area. And the studies that came out on that were not all that great. It showed that rather than creating as many new jobs as we had hoped, it actually kind of shifted some jobs around. So kind of what Senator Eakin's talking about, if in my district, the border cities goes to Dilworth, but in Hawley and Barnesville and Detroit Lakes, when you kind of do that, you just move the border over a little bit. And I think we can look at things. Border cities provide some property tax relief. It provides cities to do various economic development type of things. And I think you could spur off of the border cities and look at expanding that. But even a better thing is, how do you bring people to rural Minnesota? How do you, we've got the best farmland in the world. Why not have the best quality of life in the world? And you do that by investing properly in your education, starting with pre-K on. You do that making sure you have excellent health facilities, because we have a higher percent of senior citizens. So are we going to have top-notch facilities to take care of our senior citizens? Do we have a top-notch infrastructure so we can move goods to and from? Do we have a tax system that helps your senior citizens and help your farmers and help bring people into this area? I think those efforts, kind of where I'm coming from, rather than kind of maybe setting up and picking on certain areas, would be better. And that takes more of a statewide investment, but that's what we as a state should be really looking to do in the first place, is how can we make this place, entire rural Minnesota, the best place to live.
Great. And Representative Lean.
Well, I and Senator Eakin, well, really all three of us, we are very supportive of not just a bonding bill overall, but making sure that Moorhead grade separation is in the bill. There are two other grade separations. I believe they're Wilmer and Coon Rapids that would also be funded in this bill. So I think if a couple nuances, I think if we have a bonding bill and it's a large enough bonding bill, if it's just going to be $100, $200 million, those three grade separations cost $61 million in total, with Moorhead being about $42 million of that. So I think it's going to be the size of the bill, and I think it's going to be, the timing of the bill. Certainly if we had the bill that, closer to that $1 billion size that we had last year, certainly the grade separation would be in the bill. I was talking with the transportation chair in the House just a couple weeks ago because his committee had informational hearings on all these different transportation-related bonding projects. They went from his committee on to the bonding committee, and he had said, nope, I get it. I'm supportive of these 3 grade separations. I know how crucial they are to your communities. So it's on the radar of the legislature. It's just a matter of kind of pulling all these pieces together and getting a large bonding bill done this year. In regards to the Renaissance Zone, I think it's the way I kind of look at this is it's more effective, I think, to focus efforts and to focus energies on an existing program rather than, going out and trying to get all sorts of folks together from around the state, because it would take statewide initiative to get a Renaissance Zone program in Minnesota. And so I think our efforts are better spent by focusing on what we have right now, the Border City program. First of all, making that permanent, making that funding permanent so that we don't have to keep going back to the legislature every 2 years. That funding would, just automatically come into the program, whether it would be $1 million, $3 million a year, a biennium, whatever the case is. I think that's the first thing we really need to address. And then second is if there are different uses that we can incorporate into this Border City program, into the existing program as it is, taking a look at some additional property tax relief, taking a look at possible some income relief for those land developers and for those property developers, and then taking a look at that. And because I know a lot of folks say, well, we'd like a Border City program, and of course our situation is very unique, very different as compared to Wisconsin or Iowa or something. But if that were to work for the 5 border cities, then we could maybe take that concept, not the border city concept, but certainly some sort of expanded uses along with what the Renaissance Zone has, and apply that to other communities in Minnesota. But I think really the first step, the first focus really does need to be on that Border City program, just because it's an established program, it's a proven program, and it's a program that has bipartisan support. We have folks, both Republican, Democrat, House and Senate, that represent the Red River Valley. So that's I think the first place that we do need to start there.
Excellent, thank you. The next question, we're going to start with Representative Marquardt. And a lot of us remember the flood of 2009 and a lot of sore backs and a lot of sore arms. Contrary to popular opinion, Moorhead is not protected from a potential devastating spring flood. What will you do to bring about the completion of flood protection for our community?
I get to start on that one?
You get to start on that one.
Well, I think folks know my opinion on that. And, I said from the start that would probably be the process more than the merits of the diversion. And, you've got potentially a $2-3 billion project that's going to affect over 250,000 people that involves 2 states and several jurisdictions. The first thing you do is have a process that is fair and equitable to everyone. I say they failed totally on that, and I don't know if it can recover. Now, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources has denied the permit, and for very good reasons. When you look upstream, folks who live upstream, they're going to be impacted by the diversion. There still really is no mitigation project or anything into the future on how you're going to take care of that. When the Corps of Engineers gave the original authority for this project, the general of the Corps in that statement said that all permits and everything needed by all states and jurisdictions had to be completed before the project could begin. That didn't take place. And you've got places in Comstock, you've got a cemetery where there's decorated veterans there that have never flooded, never ever flooded. And now by design of the project, you're going to flood these areas to protect areas in South Fargo, quite frankly, that have always flooded. And when you look at the total design of the project right now, you've got about 50% of the project that is really vacant land that is being protected. I think they could lower the scope of the project, get better costs with less of an impact upstream. And so I don't know. I know there's a big celebration coming up, celebrating the 20th anniversary of the flood of '97. And on the same day, they're going to start construction on the high hazard dam to the south. I think that is rubbing it in the nose of the state of Minnesota. And I just, again, I don't understand it because without Minnesota's approval on this project, they can do everything they want, but it's just, I don't know what's going to happen there. I also think we have time to look at more potential holdings and looking at various waterways that can retain water. I still think that's a big potential. And if that flood hits at 46 or 47 feet, I don't know if people know where water's going to go, quite frankly. And so I just think there's a lot more work that needs to be done.
Thank you. Representative Lean.
Thank you, yeah, and thank you for the question bringing that up. Right now, we do have in-town levees and with home buyouts and everything that protect us up to 42.5 feet. And the FEMA floodplain in Moorhead right now is, I think, right about that 39.5 foot level, right around there. And so the question for me is, if FEMA comes in and redraws the floodplain, what is that new floodplain level going to be? You know, I am hearing things that it would be consistent with what we have right now, that 42.5 foot, but we don't know that for certain. And so that's why I think we do need to keep on efforts with some diversion project. Now, I don't know if it's going to be the project as it's planned, as it's laid out right now by the Diversion Authority. We have the courts, you know, everything is in the courts right now, and so from what I understand, they're going to, you know, kind of weigh the merits of this project and of the process and figure things out. But, you know, I think the fact of the matter is we do need those assurances that the levees that we have in town are going to be protected. And I think the only way to guarantee that we have that protection, that those levees, you know, are going to provide enough protection is with a diversion. Again, I don't know if the diversion is going to be the one that's been planned. There may have to be some changes to that project, or, you know, as far as things go right now. But, you know, a diversion would guarantee that Moorhead is finally protected and that we can finally move on from this issue.
Senator Eakin.
And I would agree with Representative Lean, and we've done a lot to protect Moorhead, and Moorhead has done a lot. I think the people of Moorhead deserve a lot of credit for what they have done to protect their community, the city of Moorhead, up to that 42.5 foot level. And that's been a great benefit, not just to the residents living here, but to the businesses as well, and to attracting businesses to our area. But more needs to be done. And we've invested a lot into the dikes that we currently have. We want to protect them further from the big flood that will come someday. Want to be prepared for that. And I do believe that the diversion is the only way that can be fully achieved, the permanent flood protection that we need. And it, as Representative Lean said, it may not be the exact proposal that's put forward right now. I've been frustrated with the process. I think there needs to be more working together, coordinating and collaborating, working together with the state of Minnesota, and the governor's office. Representative Lean and I actually organized a meeting with the governor and the folks from the Army Corps and the Diversion Authority in the city to try to facilitate some collaboration and cooperation and working out some of the differences that exist, and trying to impress upon the governor's office and the DNR, and it also included Commissioner Landwehr was there from the DNR, trying to impress upon them why this is so important to the community up here. So I would have hoped that we could have had a working group that would have worked through these problems. It's unfortunately is going through the court process right now. One of the things I said to the governor's office was that I am concerned that if it goes to the court process and if they decide in favor of the Diversion Authority and the Army Corps of Engineers, in this case, you've effectively cut Minnesota out of the negotiating process here. it's better to engage in the negotiations and find a solution that's acceptable to all.
Thank you. Some people are standing in the back. There are a few seats up here in the front if you want to come around this way, or you could walk through the center aisle and sit down, or you could stand back there and shake your head no. It's your option. All right, we're going to start the next question with Representative Lean. And a couple, again, a combined question. Medicare, Medicaid, Minnesota Sure, affordable care, you talked about that briefly. How can we be assured of affordable, accessible health care for all ages, all incomes, and all Minnesotans? And is there any action on death with dignity?
To answer the first question, no. There has not been any action this year on that death with dignity. And that refers to basically legislation like Oregon has that says, if a person is terminally ill and they themselves wish to end their lives, that, legally they could do that. And no action has come out in the House this year or the Senate this year around that issue. In terms of healthcare, overall, I think healthcare in this country really is at a crisis point. And I was just, doing some quick math here, but so far this year, we've committed over $1 billion in either premium rebates or this reinsurance program, which we don't know will guarantee that it will bring down premiums. People will get some premium relief through the rebates, throughout the year. But going forward, we have no guarantees that this reinsurance program is indeed going to bring down the costs of healthcare. And so we're really just kind of flying blind, I think, here, and throwing more money at this issue I don't think is going to address it. I don't think it's going to take care of it. Not to mention, I don't really think it's wise unless we know exactly what these dollars are going to get us. And so really, we need to be looking at all options. And these options also include a public option, or allowing people to buy into a public option. And I know people like to call this a single-payer system or whatever, and connotations come up that it's going to be free healthcare. Well, no, it's not. Healthcare is never going to be free. It's just too expensive. It's not sustainable for healthcare to be free in this country. People will have to buy in. The difference, I think, with the public option and what we have right now, all going through the private insurance companies, is that you're essentially going to grow that pool of risk. And that's how car insurance works, that's how health insurance works, is that we have as large a pool as possible to spread those costs out amongst as many people as possible. And with the public option, where you essentially have, the idea would be you have everybody buying into one pool, buying into one system, that's going to spread that cost risk out the most. It's also going to cut down on the number of negotiations that are going to happen for those reimbursement contracts between prescription drug companies, between prescription drug managers, between pharmacies, between the hospitals themselves. And when you have all these different negotiations with Blue Cross and with Medica and all these different private insurance companies, you're having all these different rates where hospitals themselves and doctors are spending a large amount of their time filing paperwork, filing forms, whereas, like I say, you have that public option, you're having one set of negotiations to find the best price possible, and you're spreading that risk out amongst people. Now, what I think is very interesting, kind of taking a look at the debate we had over this reinsurance program, is that the Republicans in the House, they weren't talking about the merits to this reinsurance program. Instead, they were taking their time really attacking a public option program. And you just take a look at the Health and Human Services budget as it stands in the House right now. A lot of those things that are happening, it's a lot of shifts and gimmicks and delaying payments for a certain amount of time, mandating that hospitals and things have cost control measures to the tune of over $200 million. And if they don't hit these cost control measures, they're not going to get the full reimbursements and everything. Putting it together, I see that as really preemptively undermining a public option and what that may look like. And I think that's really a really dishonest way to go about this conversation, because we need to be having every option on the table, because healthcare is running away from us. It's running away from us, certainly more so in greater Minnesota, where we don't have as many providers, we don't have as many insurers, and we need to do something. We need to do something, I think, drastically different. Now, I don't think we should be knee-jerk and just going out there, but we need to have answers, and we need to be having a conversation about all of these options.
Okay, thank you. Senator.
Right. Thank you. And yeah, and as far as the reinsurance bill that passed and did become law, the governor did not sign it, but he allowed it to become law. He didn't veto it either, and he did issue a letter where he expressed real concerns about the lack of guarantees. It is basically insurance for insurance companies, and again, there's no guarantee with it. I guess it's kind of a trickle-down healthcare reform theory or policy, that if you help the insurance companies, somehow that'll translate into lower rates and better coverage for the individuals buying the policies. But there's no guarantees for that at all, and it's very expensive, $540 million over the next 2 years, and that's just for the first 2 years. This is something that's supposed to be an ongoing program, which will continue to cost a very large sum of the taxpayer dollars to keep this going. I also subscribe to the Minnesota, which I already mentioned before, the Minnesota Care for All buy-in option, kind of like Minnesota's version of a Medicare for All, if you will. And it's something, Minnesota Care is a successful insurance program here in the state of Minnesota for working people who don't earn enough to afford the full cost of insurance. You still buy and pay into it, but it's on a sliding fee scale. And we have proposed, the governor has proposed, having a Minnesota Care option available for everyone in the state, that everyone can buy into. And it wouldn't be a subsidized system. It would be self-sustaining based on the fees that are being paid into it. So it would be on a level playing field with the private insurance businesses out there. And I think that that's a great idea. I think that it would inject badly needed competition into the system because it would be a competitor with the private insurance industry. And that's a good thing. It's one more option. And those who try to refer to it as single payer, it's not single payer. It's actually adding one more payer to what the payers that are already there. So it's actually increasing the number of payers out there, increasing the number of options that are available to people. So I really do believe that time has come. We actually had a vote on it when the reinsurance bill was being debated on the Senate floor. An amendment was offered by Senator Laurie that would have implemented a Minnesota Care for All in the counties outside of the metro area, because it is the rural counties, the greater Minnesota counties, that are suffering the most from these dramatic increases in healthcare premiums and suffering the most from finding options available. So for that reason, it was applied just to those counties outside the 7-county metro area. It failed on a vote of 33 to 33 on a tie vote. One member was missing, and I know that member, if they were there, would have voted in favor of it. So we came very close to passing it. And I like to point out, too, that the two medical doctors in the Senate, we have 2 doctors in the Senate, one's a Democrat, one's a Republican, they both voted for it. And so it was bipartisan from those who know the most about health care in the state Senate. So again, I feel that that's the direction to move in. What the governor had proposed would be the first of its kind in the nation. I think would be an example for other states to follow and an example for our country. And I would be an advocate of expanding Medicare for all as well. I don't think that we need to reinvent the wheel. We have a program that's working very well in this country. It's very popular, very efficient. Representative Lean already talked about the paper labyrinth that doctors and hospitals have to move through in the current system. The administrative cost of Medicare is very low. Same thing with Minnesota Care.
Representative Marquardt.
The Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, the word affordable really never happened. And when you think about it, you know, when you are saying that, you know, a pre-existing condition, you still get insurance, that's going to drive up costs. When you say you have to meet certain criteria, that's going to drive up costs. It's good. It provided better care, because I was talking to some people before Obamacare. They had a policy that did not cover hospital stays once they got there. I mean, basically, that's not an insurance policy. So that was all good, but those things naturally drove up costs. So the one key component that was in the Affordable Care Act were these exchanges, which is MNsure. Back in a couple years ago, we either could go with the federal one or we go with the state one. And the idea was that an exchange is just like going to the car lot and picking out the car you want, the quality, and at the cost that you want. But at least would have to have 4 tires and all these type of things, some basic things. Well, the idea was it was going to create this robust competition, and it never did. And that's really probably the biggest downfall and the thing that is not working right now. And that is the individual market, that 5 to 6% of those folks who don't have insurance with their employer, doesn't have Medicare, doesn't have Medicaid, and it's a lot of farmers, a lot of small business people, folks between like 59 and 64 who have retired and they don't have insurance anymore, but they're not on Medicare. That's who it hit, and a lot in rural Minnesota. At this time last year, we had no one in the exchange. If we had opened up MNsure in the exchange, you would have gone on there. If you're in the individual market, there would have been no one to pick from. So the Commissioner of Commerce, Blue Cross Blue Shield, dropped out. The Commissioner of Commerce begged some other ones. They said, well, we'll stay in, but you got to say we can do 50 to 70% increases. It went up. We used to have something called MNsha, where those with pre-existing conditions and high claims, we had a separate pool. Those went into that individual market and drove up cost. And so what do we have to do? I agree, both with Senator and Representative, that we need for sure another option. I mean, so when we go there, that in rural Minnesota, we're assured at least one option, and that would be the extension of Minnesota Care. And right now they're looking at the premiums would be about $480 a month. And after about a $13 million startup cost, it would be completely paid for by premiums. So it would not be subsidized at all by the government. Now, one downside of MNcare is that the reimbursement rates are low. So you talk to clinics and hospitals and that, and they're low. Well, right now we've spent $540 million on a reinsurance plan. We certainly could put some money into that plan to raise up those reimbursement rates. But the key is we've got to have choices out here, and there are no guarantees. Even with the reinsurance, there are no guarantees right now that we're going to have people in that individual market or MNsure. So we need to deal with it. It's the individual market's on the verge of collapse, and hopefully we can get some things done this session.
I believe this is for only the senator. The Senate election bill contains provisions that could cost more at school district, tens of thousands of dollars for a special election. What's the status of that bill?
And I do not serve on the Senate Elections Committee, so I'm not familiar with that provision. But that's something that whoever is asking the question, I would be glad to visit with them afterwards and get the information.
Great. There is a number of kind of, did you have an answer to that?
No.
Oh.
I have hard enough time trying to figure out what's in the House, much less the Senate.
Would you like to sing for a while or
Yeah.
something like that? A number of other questions. Any slumlords who refuse to make repairs in Moorhead in Minnesota, is that an issue throughout the state? And who do they contact? I believe there's somebody at City Hall.
No, there isn't. I've tried City Hall, I've tried the county attorney, I've tried everybody. Contacted the mayor, no one has an answer.
Okay.
And the repeat offenders.
Okay.
We could talk afterwards and get,
Okay. All right. Proposed shortage in the fire and police pension fund. Will the proposed fix pass? And what of other public pension funds? Many retirees depend on these provisions. And I would venture to say, too, I think the people would be surprised throughout the entire state of Minnesota how much business depends on the fact that we have pension plans for a lot of our public employees. So what's the status of that?
Yeah, well, I don't think that in the end it's going to pass all the way through. I have concerns about it. I don't think that we should be messing with the pension plans. That's a very important piece of the compensation package for our public employees and for our police and fire protection. I think we need to be attracting good quality people into these professions, and that's one of the ways that we do that, is making sure that we offer good pension plans for them, and we need to follow through on the obligations that we've made. We've made these obligations. We need to follow through on them.
Yeah, we have a separate pension committee, and I know the situation is that in some of those funds, and it's probably about police and fire, teachers. They're below solvency. They like it, when they look at the actuaries into the future, they're below that. So some adjustments has to be made that either employee contributions, employer contributions, or both, or the state sometimes has come in and covered some of it, or sometimes they'll take the inflation down on what you're receiving to try to get that up. But they're always looking ahead, and every once in a while, depending on the markets and so forth, they dip down and up. But overall, actually, the pensions in Minnesota are sitting pretty good. But once a year, they kind of, even if you're not on the committee, the folks come around and visit with legislators. And it was early in the session, but I know the teachers, one, they need to do some fixes, and I'm wondering if also the fire and police was another one where I think they might have to do some fixes on. And usually the legislature usually solves that. I mean, as Senator Eakin says, we've got a strong commitment to what was promised the folks. And also, if you want to attract police officers and fire department folks, then you've got to have a good pension plan too.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We do need a strong pension plan, and not just police and fire, but, other state employees. That's something that a lot of people go into the public sector. It's not for the pay necessarily. It's because of those benefits and that guarantee. And so, in a certain regard, people are making sacrifice on their income, on their wages and things, to serve the public sector. And by extension, they get those maybe more richer benefits or better pensions. I know the governor had some concerns, and I'm not exactly certain what's being discussed this year in the legislature. I know the governor had some concerns last year that there were only increases to the employee contributions and not both the employee and the employer contributions. Also, it gets talked about, possibly slowing COLA increases into the out years. That's another option. But ultimately, I think I guess just my overall focus is just protecting that defined benefit for the public employee pensions, as opposed to going into the defined contribution, which would be more like a 401k or an IRA, where it's really kind of, based on the ups and downs, the swings of the market. And so really, I think that's really the crux of this issue, is protecting those public employee pensions by making sure that it is that defined benefit pension, that it remains intact.
Terrific. Thank you. We're going to go ahead and go to closing comments. I just have a few general questions in here that have come in, and I'm intrigued by them because this is some questions from things that have happened on the federal level, and I'm wondering if you want to talk about any impact on Minnesota. Condemning the states cracking down on freedom of assembly, and where do you stand on that? And consumer protection for internet and data privacy, and where do you stand on those issues? So in your closing comments, if you would please think about those two issues as you're making your closing comments. And I will invite you to start with the closing comments, Senator Eakin.
As far as the freedom of assembly, I believe strongly in the freedom of assembly. Now, I know there's legislation that's being proposed and that is moving, and we haven't had it on the floor of the Senate yet. I know you have in the House. That would increase penalties for blocking roads and bridges and disrupting things at airports and so on. And I do think that the freedom to express yourself should be done in a way that doesn't create hazards or dangers for the general public. So obviously there should be some kind of penalty for that. But I don't know, and I don't know what the penalties are that were being proposed. They should not be excessive either, just because they happen to disagree with the ones that are protesting. But protests are a very, very important, vital part of our American democracy, and we need to protect that, and we need to make sure that people aren't afraid to express their opinions freely and to assemble and to demonstrate and to be heard. I understand the desire to make sure that we're not blocking roadways where ambulances can't get people to the hospital and things of that nature. I understand that, but I do have concerns about going too far and going after groups, not because of their actions, but because of their views. That is not appropriate. And as far as data privacy, I know you're asking about that. We were talking about the Real ID law. I know there's concerns about data privacy concerned with that one individual in the federal government, the Director of Homeland Security, who's not an elected position, it's appointed by the President of the United States by one person, would have significant influence and control over the Real ID program, and there are some concerns about their ability to expand the power of this law, be able to gather more information. I have concerns about that myself. It's one of the reasons that in the Senate we did put on an amendment that would require, if there's any changes that are proposed or being implemented by the Director of Homeland Security, that it would then come back to the state of Minnesota once again and would have to be revoted on in order to agree to those changes. So that was done. Also, with the Real ID, there's something called the Enhanced Driver's License, which you can get right now in Minnesota. It's just a handful of states that have an Enhanced Driver's License. It allows you to get into Canada without a passport, and it was done because a lot of people travel between Minnesota and Canada on a regular basis. That also will allow you to get on the domestic flights, allow you to get into federal buildings. It's currently offered in only 14 licensing bureaus around the state. The closest one to us is Detroit Lakes. We also put in that Real ID bill a provision saying that the Enhanced Driver's License you'll be able to access them at every licensing bureau across the state. So you have another option available. If you're not comfortable with the Real ID, you can go with the Enhanced Driver's License. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I guess this is a closing statement as well. So this is so important. I've often said that one of the biggest deficits we have isn't a monetary one, but a deficit in political participation. We need more of that. We need more people being engaged, and I really applaud you for being here and being engaged in the process. It's so important to the quality of life of people in Minnesota. A lot of people may not like politics, but whether you like it or not, it has an important impact on your lives. And that's the reason that I got involved in politics. And at the state level, we may not reach quite as many people. We don't reach as many people as they do at the federal government level. But I think that the state government does touch people's lives very deeply, and probably more deeply than even the federal government. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you very much for coming out tonight. Thank you, Lori. Thanks to the League of Women Voters and the Moorhead Library for hosting. On the first question on certainly peaceful assembly is protection of the First Amendment. However, I do not think blocking busy freeways and airports is peaceful assembly. And right now there's a bill in the House that I voted yes on that would increase the penalty for blocking a freeway and blocking the airport from a misdemeanor to a gross misdemeanor. We heard testimony of, not only is it a public safety concern of people getting hit by cars and vice versa, but you have people on these freeways that are headed to places. We heard cases, there was an emergency, someone's trying to get to the doctor and so forth. So I strongly support peaceful assembly, and I think there's a million other ways to do that properly and to get your message just as effectively out than going on and blocking highways and creating a public endangerment. In the closing argument, I was talking, or statements. I think I'm still in the campaign mode. But, I talked early on about the right priorities and the right balance. And the right priority is, how do you try to make rural Minnesota the best place to raise a family, to live, to run a business, to farm, for veterans and students and so forth. And that's why the priorities and the balance that we look at has to be right. I think we need property tax relief in the tax bill for farmers and businesses and families, Social Security, tax relief if we can do that. And that's probably about a third of the budget. A third's got to go into education, because we have to get to the world's best workforce. That's how we attract businesses here, and that's how we attract people here. And Minnesota, we've always ranked pretty well there because we've always had a well-trained, well-educated workforce. And so our investment in education, and now the focus on early education, has to be paramount. Healthcare. We have to make sure we're taking care of our senior citizens, taking care of our most vulnerable, and making sure that everyone has the best health care available. And we have to make sure we pay those workers who are doing that job. When it gets to economic, we didn't talk about broadband. Broadband is the great economic equalizer for rural Minnesota. When you talk about just 25 download and 3 upload, or it might be the other way, megabits, in the Twin Cities, they're like 99%. We're about 60% out here in rural Minnesota. What an economic disadvantage. We need to invest a lot more in broadband. And if we were talking about 60% coverage for telephone or electricity right now, we'd be down in the state capitol with pitchforks demanding better, and we need to do that. So hopefully, when all is said and done, I think we're going to get there to the right balance and the right priorities. And like Senator Eakin said, we're still in an important part of our session right now. So your input and people coming together, this is your government, not ours. That new state capitol is your new state capitol, not ours. And any help you can provide is greatly welcome. But thank you again for coming out. Thanks for the opportunity.
I just want to sum up one of the things, or a couple of things I heard in your comments specifically: peaceful assembly and bring pitchforks to St. Paul. I'm paying close attention here.
We'll stay on the sidewalks.
Stay.
Use the pitchforks, and remove the manure from the.
All right.
I'll take more than pitchforks.
All right. I apologize, but I couldn't help but note that.
Thank you,
Lee.
Lori. I appreciate you moderating tonight, and of course the league and the Moorhead Library too here for for hosting us, and all of you for coming out, and the audio-visual folks for bringing this to the people who couldn't be here tonight. Certainly appreciate that. To answer those two questions, though, I think it's a terrible idea. The fact that internet service providers could be selling our personal user information to other people without our permission, without our consent. I think Representative Thiessen had an amendment to address this, and kind of a Minnesota sort of approach to this to say no, that's not allowable in state law. So, as far as the protest bills, I think it's really troubling that we have a lot of these bills going on, and it's not just Minnesota, it's around the country. And I say that because people don't take to the streets in mass protests when everything is fine, and they're getting good wages, and their kids are going to school, going to college, they're putting food on the table. People take to the streets like that when there's unrest and when there's dissatisfaction. And I think you really only have to look at the last couple of years, whether it's the Tea Party movement that really started in 2010, or the Million Women's March, or Black Lives Matter, whatever it is. And it's both sides of the aisle here with the popularity of candidates like Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. People want something different. And I think if that's the legislature's response, is to, kind of shut people down and say, basically, the way I see these bills are basically, we don't want to be bothered with your concerns, just let us handle it, I think that's just flat out the wrong approach. We need to be bringing people into the conversation. We need to be asking people, okay, things aren't working, so how do we change this? How do we make things better? And like I say, you just take a look at candidacies like Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. They brought something different. They brought something that both sides of the aisle wanted to hear. And that's really where I think the legislature needs to do a better, just elected officials overall need to do a better job of reaching out to people and getting that response, that feedback from people. How do we make this work better for you all? But and I think Representative Marquardt is absolutely right. It is about priorities. And that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing $1.3 billion of the $1.6 billion surplus we have in tax cuts, while we're seeing less than inflationary increases for K-12. We're seeing the eventual elimination of early childhood learning in the voluntary program in the school districts. We're seeing either tuition increases or campus cuts at higher education. We're seeing cuts to programs like the Job Creation Fund, the Minnesota Investment Fund, that have proven track records of economic success for the entire state. And it's just about priorities. And I think the direction of really loading up the tax bill like that is the wrong priority. I think it's really a detriment to the future of our economy and the future of our state. And specifically with education, that's the way people improve themselves, not just going out and getting a better job, but really economically, socially empowering themselves. And that's what we need to build on. So again, really, thank you all for coming out tonight and for posing your questions to us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Let's, yes, a round of applause for our representatives and the senator. As part of the League of Women Voters, it really is important that we do have a representative democracy, and we do have our representatives here tonight representing us. And I was so struck by your comments because they reflect so much optimism and so much insight into what is good about our community. And I think I see that with our citizens too, so I really appreciate the fact that you really reflect our values and what we think is important. I want to thank the library tonight for opening their facility to us and hosting the event. Again, I want to thank the Moorhead Cable Access Media for their support and being here tonight and making sure that this, again, that people have access to this information in ways other than just being here tonight. And I want to thank all of you for coming because, again, a strong democracy depends on an informed citizenry, and thank you all for being here and proving that right. Thanks so much for coming.